Aisha lived on the edge of the forest with her 2 children, 10-year-old Ali and little Mina, whose laughter often softened the silence of their small mud-brick home. Life had been hard since her husband died 3 years ago, but Aisha's hands never stopped working. She gathered herbs from the forest, sold them in the nearby village, and treated sick neighbors who couldn't afford a doctor. Her home was poor, yet filled with the quiet warmth of faith and endurance. That evening, the forest glowed beneath a sinking sun. The air smelled of damp earth and smoke from distant cooking fires. Aisha and her children were near the stream, collecting the last of the day's herbs, when Ali suddenly stopped. He pointed toward the western hills. A thin column of black smoke curled into the sky. "Ammi, look," he said, excitement mixing with fear. "Something's burning." Aisha shaded her eyes. "That's too far for a forest fire. It looks like—" She broke off. Somewhere beyond the trees, metal gleamed in the sunlight, half hidden by branches. Without another word, she picked up her basket. "Stay close. Someone might be hurt." They followed the smell, first sharp and bitter, the scent of burning fuel, and then they heard it, the faint crackle of fire and the moan of twisted steel. When they reached the clearing, Aisha froze. A helicopter lay torn apart in the grass. Its blades snapped like broken wings. Smoke hissed from the engine. Ali gasped. "Ammi, is anyone alive?" Aisha hurried forward, covering her mouth against the smoke. She called out, but only the wind answered. Then, behind a tangle of branches, she saw movement ahead, trembling weakly. She knelt beside the figure and found a man in a ruined business suit, his face cut and bloodied, his eyes closed. "He's alive," she whispered. "Quick, Mina, bring the water." The little girl ran to her mother's side, while Aisha tilted the stranger's head gently and poured a few drops between his cracked lips. He coughed, barely conscious. She tore a strip from her dupatta, pressed it to the gash on his arm, and began to look for anything that could be used as a stretcher. "Ali, the cart," she said. "The one we used for firewood." The boy ran back through the trees. Aisha stayed by the man, fanning away the smoke, speaking softly as if her voice alone could hold him to life. "You'll be all right, Sahib. Stay with me." The sun was sinking fast when Ali returned, dragging the small wooden cart. Together they lifted the man, struggling under his weight. Mina, wide-eyed, kept whispering prayers she had learned from her mother. The path home was rough and narrow, roots catching at their feet, but Aisha refused to stop. By the time they reached their hut, the sky had turned violet and the first stars were appearing. She laid the man on the woven mat near the hearth, lit an oil lamp, and began to clean his wounds with boiled water and crushed neem leaves. Mina watched silently. "Ammi, who is he?" "I don't know, Beta," Aisha said, concentrating on the bleeding arm. "But Allah sent him to us, and we must help." Ali crouched nearby, fascinated and worried. "He must be rich, Ammi. Look at his watch." "Maybe," she said, wringing out a cloth. "Rich or poor, pain feels the same." She stayed awake through the night, grinding herbs, changing bandages, and murmuring verses under her breath. The firelight flickered over the stranger's pale face. Outside, the forest murmured with night insects, and rain began to fall softly, pattering on the roof. When dawn broke, Aisha's eyes ached from sleeplessness. She poured herself a cup of tea made from dried lemongrass and glanced at the man again. His breathing had steadied. She leaned close, pressing a hand to his forehead. The fever was lower. Relief washed through her. Hours later, a low groan broke the quiet. The man's eyelids fluttered open. Confusion clouded his gaze. "You're safe," Aisha said gently. "Don't move too quickly." He blinked at the unfamiliar surroundings, the mud walls, the hanging herbs, the two children watching him from the doorway. "Where am I?" His voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "In my home," she answered. "You fell from the sky, Saheb. We found you in the forest." He tried to sit up, winced, and sank back. "The helicopter, the pilot." Her eyes lowered. "I found only you." He closed his eyes, and for a long time neither of them spoke. The only sound was the hiss of the fire. Then Aisha brought a clay bowl of thin soup and held it to his lips. "Drink a little. It will help," he obeyed, swallowing slowly. The taste was strange, earthy, herbal, but warmth spread through his body. "Thank you," he murmured. "There's no need," she replied. "When someone is in trouble, we help. That is all." The children crept closer. Mina clutched her doll made from old cloth. "Does it hurt?" she asked shyly. He smiled faintly. "A little." Ali studied him with curiosity. "What's your name, Sahib?" "Arman," he said after a pause. "Arman Malik." Ali grinned. "I'm Ali, and this is Mina. Ammi fixed you with her magic leaves." Aisha shook her head. "They're not magic, only medicine. Allah gives healing." Arman looked at her properly, then at the tired eyes, the hands rough from work, the calm strength in her voice. Something about her presence steadied him more than any medicine could. Days passed. Arman's strength returned slowly. Aisha changed his dressings twice a day, sometimes humming softly as she worked. Ali brought water from the stream, and Mina fed the hens outside. Arman watched them move around the small home with the ease of those who had little but shared everything. He had spent his life surrounded by servants, yet none of them had ever shown the quiet care that this woman and her children offered without question. On the third evening, as the sun slipped behind the trees, Arman managed to sit outside on a stool. The forest stretched endlessly before him, glowing in orange light. Aisha was cutting herbs nearby. "You live alone here?" he asked. "Yes," she said, not looking up. "The village is an hour away. It's safer near the forest. I know its paths." "And your husband?" "He died 3 years ago." Her voice was steady, but the brief silence that followed told its own story. "A tree fell while he was cutting wood. Since then, we manage as we can." "I'm sorry," Arman said. Aisha smiled faintly. "Everyone loses someone, Sahib. What matters is what we do with what remains." He watched the children chasing each other near the stream, their laughter echoing through the trees. "They seem happy." "They are," she said. "They don't know we are poor." That night, lying on his mat, Arman thought about those words. For the first time in years, he wondered what happiness really meant. He had wealth beyond measure, yet he could not remember the last time he had laughed like that boy or slept as peacefully as that little girl. When dawn came, Aisha found him awake, staring at the light filtering through the cracks in the wall. "You should rest more," she said, handing him a cup of herbal tea. "I can't," he admitted. "I keep thinking about the crash. I should have died. Then perhaps Allah wants you to live for a reason you don't see yet," she said simply. He met her gaze and found no pity there, only quiet certainty. As days turned to a week, Arman grew stronger. He began helping Ali gather firewood, though the boy teased him for his clumsiness. Mina would bring flowers and insist he smell each one. Aisha sometimes laughed softly at the sight, and her laughter filled the small house with life. Arman felt something shift inside him, something he couldn't name yet. The forest that had once seemed wild and endless now felt like shelter. The woman who had saved him was no longer just a stranger. One afternoon, heavy clouds gathered again. The wind stirred the trees, carrying the smell of rain. Aisha hurried to bring the herbs inside. "Will the roof hold?" Arman asked. "It always does," she said. "But we'll need extra firewood." He followed her outside despite her protests. The first drops of rain hit his face. He looked up at the dark sky and felt oddly alive. Together they stacked the wood, laughing when Mina slipped in the mud and Ali tried to catch her. By nightfall the storm raged, thunder rolling over the hills. Inside, the little family huddled near the fire. Aisha poured tea into small cups. Mina climbed into Arman's lap without asking. "I'm scared," she whispered. He held her gently. "There's nothing to fear." Storms end. Aisha watched them from across the room. For a moment her heart softened. She had learned long ago not to expect anything from fate, yet this strange guest had brought light into her children's eyes. When the rain finally stopped, silence returned, deep and comforting. The fire burned low. Aisha looked around her humble home at her sleeping children, at the man who had fallen from the sky and now slept under her roof, and whispered a prayer of gratitude. She did not know who he truly was, nor what kind of life waited beyond the forest for him. She only knew that saving him had reminded her that kindness was never wasted. Outside, the forest dripped with silver rain, and somewhere in the distance, dawn was beginning to rise again. And thus began the story of a poor widow who saved a stranger's life never, knowing that he was a man whose name was known across cities, and whose heart, until that moment, had never been truly alive. Morning sunlight spilled through the forest canopy, scattering patterns on the floor of Aisha's small home. The scent of freshly brewed tea mixed with damp earth after the storm. Arman awoke to the sound of a bird calling from the nearby mango tree. His bandaged arm ached, but his body felt stronger. The first thing he saw was Aisha sitting by the window, sewing a tear in Ali's shirt while humming softly to herself. For a long moment he simply watched her. There was something grounding in the rhythm of her hands, the quiet concentration on her face. In the city, mornings had always been noise and deadlines, meetings, calls, schedules. But here, time seemed to breathe. When she noticed him awake, she smiled faintly. "You slept well," she said. "That's a good sign. I think your herbs are working better than any hospital medicine," he replied, adjusting himself carefully. She chuckled. "It's the herbs and the prayers together." Ali ran in just then, barefoot and cheerful, holding a small wooden toy he'd carved from a branch. "Look, Sahib, I made a horse," he said proudly. Arman took it, studying the uneven lines. "It's wonderful, Ali. You made this yourself?" Ali nodded, grinning wide. "Ami says we should make what we can't buy." Days passed beneath the whispering trees, and the stranger, once a man of steel and cities, learned the rhythm of the forest. Aisha, the widow, tended his wounds with herbs and patience. Her hands, though calloused from hard work, carried the gentleness of healing. Her children watched curiously. The little boy fetched water from the stream. The girl held the leaves for her mother. Slowly the stranger, Armand, began to smile again. He asked, "Do you live here alone?" Aisha nodded softly. "We're never alone. The forest protects us." Days turned to weeks. Armand helped gather wood, tried to cook, and failed terribly. Laughter echoed for the first time in his life that wasn't from a party, but from joy. One evening, rain poured suddenly. Aisha rushed to cover the fire while Armand helped her hold the roof from leaking. They both laughed under the dripping roof, faces lit by firelight. In that small hut, surrounded by the scent of wet earth and herbs, something changed. Armand found peace in the simplicity he never knew. Aisha found comfort in a presence she never expected. As the fire crackled, her son whispered, "Mama, will he stay?" She smiled faintly, watching Armand dry his soaked shirt near the fire. "Some guests," she said, "are sent by fate." That night the rain washed away more than pain. It washed away the walls around two hearts, learning to heal together. The forest awoke to a strange sound, not birds this time, but the roar of engines cutting through the dawn. Aisha shaded her eyes as helicopters broke the sky. Wind tore at her shawl. Her children clung to her legs. Armand stepped forward, half-healed, torn between two worlds. "They found me," he whispered. The rescue team rushed in, uniforms, stretchers, noise. Aisha's hut, once their quiet world, now trembled under the beating blades. He turned to her. "You saved my life, Aisha. I owe you everything." She smiled softly. "You owe me nothing. Just remember the forest and kindness." The helicopter rose, leaving dust, silence, and three lonely figures staring at the fading sky. The city lights blinked like cold stars as Armand stepped from his car. Cameras flashed. Assistants bowed. Reporters shouted his name. But inside, everything was empty. The marble floors echoed not with footsteps, but with absence. He tried meetings, parties, charity events, but his thoughts drifted back to the forest firelight, to laughter over clay bowls. Nights found him staring from his penthouse window, hearing the echo of a child's voice. "Uncle Armand, will you stay forever?" The city had healed his body, but not his heart. Weeks later, a black SUV rolled once again toward the forest path. Aisha looked up from her herb baskets as dust rose on the horizon. Her heart stopped. Could it be? Armand stepped out, dressed simply, holding a small basket of gifts. The children ran to him, shouting his name, hugging his legs. He smiled through tears. "I told you I'd come back." That evening the forest glowed under a setting sun. They sat together by the stream, no promises, no riches, only peace. The billionaire had found his true fortune in compassion, in family, and in a love born from kindness. The screen fades to sunset. Sometimes the richest hearts are found in the humblest places.